Welcome back to Beginning Composition. This is week 5, chapters 29 through 31. Paper format. Paper format is a very large part of the paper grade. When you hand in a paper, most likely the first thing you will be judged on is the format of your paper. When you hand in a paper, you want to make sure your paper looks neat, attractive, and, of course, easy to follow. Here are a few guidelines to set up your paper. All papers should be printed on 8.5 by 11 inch paper. Usually white paper would be expected. For margins, you should have 1-inch margins for your paper. Usually all papers start with a 1-inch margin unless you have set your computer to specifically use different margins. The white space is needed for instructors to leave comments and also so the paper is more readable. Center the title of your paper on the first line of your paper under your header. Each instructor you have may ask for a different paper setup. Follow what your instructor says first and foremost. They are of course the person grading you. Don't go against what they say or the rules they're asking you to follow. Follow them first. After your instructor, follow college rules and of course the format your instructor is asking you to use. So this may be MLA format, APA, Chicago, and so on and so forth. So again, instructor first, college second, and then of course the specific format that you need to follow. So further guidelines. Make sure each and every paragraph is indented by 5 spaces from the left-hand side. 5 spaces is identical to 1 tab. All papers, except for the title, need to be left adjusted. This means that your paper should line up on the left-hand side. So your center is where your title will be, and left adjusted is where your paper should start. Try to avoid hyphenating words at the end of sentences. This means if you have a word that doesn't have enough space to complete the entire word, then make sure the word goes on to the next line. As you will see from our paper formatting setup video, you will already have it set up, so hyphenating won't even be an issue. So, for these separate tutorials, I will be making separate tutorials and have videos for you to watch on the following ideas, but make sure to double space your papers with no extra spacing, so nothing beyond double spacing in between paragraphs. Use your name, instructor name, class, and date where appropriate, and where your instructor, of course, calls for it. Title. It should be a fine words that tell what the paper is about. I'm sorry, that's an error. It should be a few words that tell what the paper is about. It should not be a complete sentence, so you do not want your title to be an entire complete sentence. Also, do not rely on the title to help explain the first line of your paper. The first sentence should not explain the title, but it should lead into a great start of your paper. So what we're saying here, do not rely on the title to tell what that first paragraph is going to be about. Do not rely on the title to lead into your first sentence. You want to make sure that the first sentence and that title are, of course, related, but that they don't flow into each other. The title should be separate from what the first sentence starts. And the first sentence should really start your paper off right to lead into the rest of your essay. So, continuing on, Chapter 30, Capital Letters. Capital letters are used with number 1, the first word in a sentence or a direct quotation. So, the first word in a sentence always needs to be capitalized. Where it says or a direct quotation, anything that you see fall into quotation marks. So you'll have quotation marks. The first word needs to be capitalized in that sentence. So the first word in a direct quotation needs to be capitalized. Number 2, it says names of person and the word I. I've noticed in some of your work that you're not capitalizing the word I. For academic work and writing, you want to make sure that I is always capitalized and not a lowercase. This is something that hasn't been enforced as much, especially with texting and emoticons. You want to make sure that you are always capitalizing the word I. And again, names of person. Unless that person specifically and legally has it documented where they wouldn't have a capital letter to start off their first or last name, you are always going to capitalize the name of a person, so both first and last name. Number 3, it says names of particular places. Things such as the Nile River, the Eiffel Tower, Costa Rica. Anything that is a particular place, you want to make sure it is capitalized as well. Number 4, it says names of the days of the week, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Months, all the months that, of course, we can list off those 12 months. And, of course, holidays. So, days of the week, months, and holidays also need capital letters to start off the word. Number 5, it says names of commercial products. So, commercial products are anything that are sold in stores. So, things such as Tide, or Woolite, or food products such as Ritz, brands like Kleenex, Camelback. All the things that are the names of the commercial products would be capitalized. Now, I understand Kleenex is also a brand as well as a product. You want to make sure that the commercial products have their own capitalized names. At number 6, this is names of organizations. So this can be anything like the NCAA. So the NCAA, of course, would be capitalized. The NFL, the National Football League, would be capitalized. Any other organizations you can think of, college fraternities, any of those organizations, you want to make sure they're capitalized. At number 7, it says titles of books, magazines, newspapers, articles, stories, poems, films, podcasts, TV shows, songs, papers that you write, and the like. Those should all have capital letters that start off the names and words. So, when it comes to capital letters, the first word in a sentence needs to be capitalized, as well as any direct quotations in a sentence. If a direct quotation is split into 2 parts, only the first part needs to be capitalized. Take a look at the example below. This example states, the young boy shouted, comma, quotation mark, are you ready to play ball? Question mark, quotation mark. So the, of course, needs to be capitalized, as well as are is the first word in the direct quotation, and so are would be capitalized as well. So, the beginning of a sentence and the beginning of a direct quotation both need to be capitalized. So, at this moment, if you would, complete the Blackboard activity for capital letters. When you are complete, just hit submit and it will be entered into the gradebook. As we continue on with this PowerPoint presentation, numbers and abbreviations. In writing in general, if you have the time to write it out, don't abbreviate to get by. If a number would take more than 2 words, of course write the number numerically. Abbreviations like Mr. and Miss are tricky. Use Mr. and Miss as a starting point for every abbreviation unless someone tells you to acknowledge them differently. So I can see with the acknowledge here on my PowerPoint presentation, of course the hyphenation is not set up properly. But again, numbers and abbreviation. If it takes more than 2 words to write out a number, then write it numerically. As well as with Mr. and Miss, you want to make sure that you can use them as an abbreviation. Alright, Chapter 32, Apostrophes PowerPoint. If you haven't noticed, the Apostrophes PowerPoint is already in our announcements. If not, you can always click into it here. So the mighty apostrophe. The apostrophe has only a handful of uses, but these uses are very important. A misplaced apostrophe can be annoying, not to mention lonely. So the apostrophe is used, 1, to create possessives. Number 2, to show contractions. And number 3, to create some plural forms. Excuse me. So the mighty apostrophe. The apostrophe is used to create possessive forms for singular and plural nouns, especially nouns referring to people. So as you can see, the apostrophe placement shows the possession. The mayor, it's his car or her car. The mayor owns the car. So possession for the mayor. Mayor, apostrophe S, so belonging to. And my father's mustache. Well, of course, that mustache belongs to my father. And so that's why we end it with an apostrophe S. So here in our next few examples, it says Pedritos. So Pedrito, comma, S, his sister. Or I assume because this is a Spanish word that it's a he. But his sister. Joe Kennedy's habits. So those habits belong to Joe Kennedy. So when a noun already ends in S, you can decide whether or not to use another S after the apostrophe. So it's your choice, even when you're showing possession. So here it says Charles' car or Charles' car. Usually in our writing, we use the second example, but of course, if you see it S apostrophe S, it is not considered wrong. It is always your choice. But no matter what, we know that the car belongs to Charles. With multisyllabic words, don't add another S after the apostrophe. If you take just a second to say these out loud, you will realize the multisyllabic words, it takes on a whole different meaning if you add in more S's. So it says Dumas's second novel. So think again if I added another S after. Or Jesus' birth. Because these are multisyllabic already, if you add another S after the apostrophe S, in saying it, you add another S to the entire word. So just try it for a second. Add another S to these words, and how does that word come out? Hopefully you found a little humor within these words. So Socrates' ideas in Illinois legislature. So Illinois's or Socrates's. Of course, if you heard someone saying that, you may give them a double look. So to form the possessive of an inanimate object, we're usually better off using an of phrase. But the apostrophe possessive is not impossible, especially with expressions of time and in personifications. So here example, the roar of the grease paint. The smell of the crowd. A year's salary, my heart's desire, your dollar's worth, and the paper's conclusion. So again, as you can see at the bottom, the apostrophe possessive is not impossible, especially with expressions of time and in personifications. But the roar of the grease paint, so the grease paint's roar, really just doesn't sound as nice, of course, with this inanimate object as the roar of the grease paint and the smell of the crowd. Continuing on. To form the possessive of a plural noun, we pluralize first and then add the apostrophe. The Kennedy's house. So it's S and then the apostrophe, telling us that this is the Kennedy family's home. The children's playhouse. This belongs to more than one person. So children obviously is an exception, where children is a plural word already, and why it does not end in S. The traveler's expectations. So again, travelers, more than one, followed by the apostrophe. Notice that with an irregular plural, just like children, the apostrophe will come before the S. So, a contraction allows us to blend sounds by omitting letters from a verb construction. The apostrophe shows where something is left out. Our first example, I'm a student here equals I'm a student here. That contraction allows us to leave out the letter A of am, so I'm a student here. I have been working on the railroad equals I've been working on the railroad. So of course this allows us to leave out a little bit of have to create the contraction I've. This next one, they could have been great together equals they could have been great together. Again, the contraction allows us to leave out part of have. Here are a few more contraction examples. Let us go equals let's go. Who is there versus who's there. It is Deidre versus it's Deidre. So reminder, it's, so IT apostrophe S, is a contraction for it is. The possessive of it equals its. So there's no apostrophe in the possessive of it. So the apostrophe is also used to form the plural of digits and letters. So the word Mississippi has 4 S's. She got 3 A's and 2 B's last semester. She dotted all her I's very carefully. In this instance, if we didn't have the apostrophe here, it would create the word is. So she dotted all her is very carefully. And that's of course why the apostrophe is needed. And to indicate omission of a number and a date. So the apostrophe stands in the place of 19 for summer of 99, and class of 19 is omitted by the apostrophe for 38, because of course we know that we have not reached 38 yet in the 2000s. The mighty apostrophe doesn't mind being used, but it wants to be used wisely. Don't just throw in an apostrophe where you think it's necessary. Take the time to realize and think through where it is necessary. So use it well, and it will be there whenever you need it. So continuing on with our PowerPoint presentation. At this point, if you would, complete Activity 6, this is on page 466, through the Blackboard Test Assignment. Please complete the test online through Blackboard. There's no need to email me this assignment. It will be completed straight through Blackboard, and the grade will be sent right into the gradebook.